Mehdi Hasan went on Piers Morgan show to discuss Hamas, the war on Gaza. I say on Gaza for a reason because this is a Western colonial invasion, right? It's a genocide. As we all know, this war been going on for several months now, and death toll is up to the 30,000s, which is wow. A lot of innocent people are dying, a lot of kids. Um, this conversation was interesting. Let's take a listen.
It certainly is. It's great to have you. Let me just take you back to October the 7th. I want you to imagine, and it's a bit of a leap, I admit, but I want you to imagine.
They always start with October the 7th. This war did not start on October the 7th. But hey, listen, let's keep going.
That you are the Prime Minister of Israel when that atrocity happens in Israel. What do?
That's a great question. So short answer is I resign because I'm responsible for that attack. I'm the one who botched security at the border. I'm the one who propped up Hamas with money from Qatar over the years and allowed them to be propped up as a way to divide the Palestinian people. I'm the one who's had millions of my own people on the streets for months protesting against my authoritarian reforms to the judiciary. So I have some shame. I have some self-respect.
These are all facts, by the way, man. You heard what he said? These are all facts. Israel are the one that, that used to fund Hamas, right? And so you're trying to tell me the whole time, this he's killing them right now. Let's go.
I have some honesty, and I say, I quit. Let someone else do this because I've failed for 20 years.
Okay, Netanyahu did not do that. And interestingly, although the majority of Israelis would like him to go, they also want him to finish the job in destroying Hamas. There's not much ambiguity.
Netanyahu is a lunatic. Right? He's holding on to this war because I believe as soon as this war is ended, he's out of office, right? People want him to resign. But let's keep going.
In terms of how Israelis feel about the mission plan. But there's obviously a lot of concern mounting around the world about the scale of Israel's response. And that's really what I guess my question was alluding to.
Yes.
I'll be honest, I've said this a lot on my Uncensored show, that I felt a real moral quandary. I can go back over tweets I've done back in 2014 where I said that Israel's response to provocation by Palestinians at the time was bordering on terrorism. I'm somebody who, when I was editor of the Daily Mirror, opposed the Iraq War before, during, and after very vociferously, and I think that aged pretty well.
Piers Morgan, he's saying all of this as a way to cover his bigotry, right? Oh, I was on their side. 2014, this. Bro, you've been pro-Israel the whole time. Dude been pro-Israel the whole time. Every time a pro-Palestinian guest come on his show, he treat them like shit, right? Nobody want to hear that. Nobody want to hear how you used to. Nobody want to hear that. We all know you're a bigot, right? We all know you're pro war. We all know you're pro Israel. Let's be real here, man. Right?
That campaign. I'm somebody that when the Qatar World Cup happened, I sprang to the defense of Qatar's right to host the World Cup and exposed a lot of Western hypocrisy. And yet, when it comes to this particular conflict, I feel genuinely conflicted, for want of a better phrase. And the point of my conflict is is that the reason I asked you that question about if you were the Prime Minister of Israel, it's very, very difficult to know how any Prime Minister of Israel could have responded in a particularly different manner to the way that Netanyahu did. Putting aside all the reasons that you say he should have resigned, and by the way, I broadly agree with them. So, in terms of the Israel people, the Prime Minister at the time,
this
the
is madness.
Response to what happened that day was going to always have to be enormous, wasn't it?
So you're right in terms of the emotional response. It was going to be enormous. And I would take us back to 9/11, Piers. You mentioned Iraq. After 9/11, there was an emotional response in the US that something had to be done, right? There's the famous Yes Minister dialogue. Something has to be done. This is something, let's do it. And we invaded Afghanistan, which didn't solve the problem of terrorism, made it worse, punished innocent people who had nothing to do with 9/11. And you'll remember at the time, Piers, both parties in the United States supported going into Afghanistan. Only one member of Congress, not Bernie Sanders, Barbara Lee of California, voted to oppose that war. 2 decades on, many people would say she was vindicated, even though she was an isolated voice and she was going against a tidal wave of opinion from liberals and conservatives said, we have to do something. And I get that. After an atrocity happens, people want to do something. But the best leaders, the most...
Yes. After something horrific happened, we usually respond emotionally, right? And what he's saying is that Israel responds with emotions after October the 7th without, instead of responding logically, right? Which makes sense. You're a country, you're a leader, you should be more logical, right? You're supposed to be the Western, whatever you call it. Let's keep going. He's cooking right now. He's cooking.
Strategic leaders, the most moral leaders, are the ones who can take a pause, take a breath, and say, are we going to make the situation better or worse? Are we striking out strategically or just for the sake of vengeance and revenge? And you talk about...
Right, I just said that. I just said this, right? As a leader, you have to assess the situation, then make a move. Not just go drop bombs on innocent people, right? How is that going to solve the issue? You know what? I'm just gonna get rid of these people, and guess what? I'm gonna get rid of Hamas. How do you get rid of ideology? You can't get rid of an ideology. You can't. It's like trying to get rid of ISIS or it's impossible, right? The more you kill these people and their families, the more they're gonna rise against you, and it might not be Hamas, but it could be something else. They could call themselves something else, right? You can't end, there's a saying that said, every man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And I believe that's what's going on right here. The pro-Palestinians, let's keep going.
Israeli prime ministers having to do this. Look, they didn't have to do it on this level. I think a lot of Israelis, despite supporting Netanyahu, would argue it didn't have to be done like this. There are different ways to retaliate against Hamas. The irony is no Israeli government has done it like this before. This is the greatest death toll for Palestine.
Right. They're making it seem like Hamas is this crazy, powerful soldier, this crazy superpower that bruh. Really?
Palestinians of any war in Israel's post-1948 history. So the fact that he did it like this was unique. I mean, look, the statistics speak for themselves, Piers. You know them. You've said them on this show. Yeah. The level of killing, the number of kids killed. You have one former UN official saying this is the highest kill rate in the world since Rwanda, right, of any conflict since Rwanda. Do not tell me that the only response to a brutal attack on...
That's insane, man. That's insane. Damn. No words. He's cooking right now, right? He's laying it down like you're supposed to. He's cooking right now. Let's go.
Civilians in Israel on October the 7th was to produce a conflict that had a kill rate equivalent to Rwanda's. Sorry, I don't accept that.
Here's what I would say, playing devil's advocate, and you might think, I'm literally playing devil's advocate, but I'm going to play it anyway, which is, all that is true. The death toll is horrific. The percentage of children being killed is horrific. But I would say, as a caveat to this, that if you think about it from the Israeli perspective, you've got 35,000 Hamas terrorists, and we'll come to whether you think they're terrorists or not in a moment, but you've got 35,000 Hamas soldiers, warriors, terrorists, whatever.
How do they get these numbers? How do they know these numbers? These numbers are lies, right? They might see a Muslim kid, and say, hey, look, Hamas. right? How do we know? How the hell are we gonna trust a government like this? You can't trust nothing that Netanyahu say. Nothing, right?
Description you want to call them, depending on whose side you're on. And they are embedded amongst a civilian population where half that population is under 18. How else do you get rid of Hamas if you don't go about it in the blunt, brutal manner that Israel is doing? And if you do it...
Oh, yeah, so we go drop bombs on people. We go drop bombs on innocent people, kill kids, and then, hey, that's going to solve everything? That's how we're going to solve this issue. Drop bombs on innocent people and kill kids. Really? That's the plan.
The way they're doing it, how do you avoid the kind of casualty rate of people under 18, given that that's half the population?
So, three things very briefly. Number one, you do it by not deliberately targeting civilian targets and schools and hospitals and cemeteries and mosques and universities.
Right. Right. Number one, you do it without killing these innocent people, attacking hospitals, dropping bombs on hospitals and camps, and come on, bro.
And churches. You don't have snipers shooting at hospitals or Christian women inside a church. That's how you avoid the casualties. Number two, I don't accept the premise of your question that this is the way to defeat Hamas. I think even if I'm an Israeli hawk, I criticize Netanyahu and say, this is not the way to defeat Hamas. This is actually absurd to think you can defeat Hamas in this way. We have countless episodes from history that show us this is not how you defeat a guerrilla movement, a resistance movement, a terror group, as you say, whatever words you want to use. In fact, you have Israeli generals saying this can't be done in this way. And number three, look, the reality is Hamas is a symptom of the problem. As long as you treat Hamas as the problem rather than as a symptom of the problem, you're never going to get rid of Hamas. Or if you do, by some fantasy means, get rid of Hamas, you'll just get another version of Hamas, because now you've got tens of thousands of orphans, you've got people who've lost their kids,
Right. You cannot destroy an ideology. You can't get rid of an ideology. It's impossible. It's like getting rid of ISIS or the Taliban. That's fantasy land, man. How are you gonna get rid of Hamas? By killing innocent people, right? By killing innocent kids. How? Like I said again, that's gonna create another Hamas, right? If they don't call it Hamas, they'll call it something else. You don't get people on your side by killing their families and and their loved ones. You do not get. Wow, this is madness.
Spouses, their siblings. What, you think they're not going to fight back in the years to come? You think they're not going to take revenge?
Well, that's how I feel.
It's absolute madness to believe.
I feel the same way.
Then we agree.
So, yeah, I think, broadly speaking, I do, because I think you can't kill the ideology. And, in fact, all you will do is entrench the ideology. I think, and that's what I don't think Israel have thought through to a logical end game, which is you're not going to get rid of the thinking that inspired Hamas, because a lot of people will have suffered such appalling grief with their close family in the way you described, that they're going to want to get revenge.
I think you're being a little too generous to the Israelis here, and with the greatest respect, I think your questions reflect a little bit of a naivety about what Israel's doing here. You're starting from the premise that Israel is trying to defeat Hamas. I don't accept that premise. I don't believe that's what Israel is trying to do.
What do you think they're trying to do?
They wouldn't be doing it this way.
Yeah, I also do not believe that Israel trying to defeat Hamas. They're trying to take over that land, right? They tried to take Gaza. That's exactly what's going on. They're not trying to defeat Hamas. Let's be real now. Let's be real. They're trying to push these people out of the of their country, of their land, so they can take over it. That's exactly what's going on. You can't be blind, man.
I think they're trying to take back Gaza. I think they're trying to erase the resistance in Gaza. I think they're trying to get rid of the people from Gaza.
Thank you.
This is their, they've mowed the lawn, as they put it in previous wars.
Yep.
This time they're going in to erase the population. There's a plausible genocide.
Okay, but let me ask you that.
If you listen to Israeli officials, as you know, it's laid out in the South African petition, they are very genocidal in their approach to flattening and burning down Gaza. It's not about destroying Hamas. And if it was...
Yes, this is a genocide. Come on, people. This is a genocide. Right? You can't call it anything else. Right?
Was about destroying Hamas, why has Netanyahu and Smotrich and others talked about how Hamas is an asset to Israel? Why do they say that openly, Piers?
Well, he was clearly massively deluded, I think, Netanyahu, about having anything to do with Hamas. I think that Netanyahu's plan was quite straightforward, which was to separate Hamas from the Palestinian Authority and create a split in the Palestinians at an official level. And he thought that that was the best way of preserving security for Israel. He couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, the thing I do want to ask you, I don't think you've called Hamas terrorists. In fact, you've gone out of your way to call them fighters. Do you still think that, or do you accept that what they did on October?
Here we go. I knew that was coming, man. I knew that was coming. He does that to to every Palestinian guest. Is Hamas a terrorist group? Yes, Hamas is a terrorist group. And also Israel is a terrorist group. Ta-da! Right? Putting a bouquet on a pig is still a pig. Really? Hamas is a terrorist group. Israel is also a terrorist group. They killed, my God.
The 7th was an act of terrorism on a heinous scale, and therefore you have to call them terrorists.
So you're wrong, Piers. In my very first MSNBC monologue after October 7th, I referred to what happened on October 7th as terrorism. In fact, when I was 16 years old, I wrote a letter to the Independent newspaper condemning Hamas bus bombings in the mid-1990s. So you're wrong on multiple levels. I don't expect you to know about my 16-year-old self, but clearly my MSNBC output is all there for anyone to see.
So
he's cooking him.
Just to be clear, it was an act of terrorism, and Hamas are terrorists. That's your position.
I think the Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians and kidnapped babies, certainly I would call them terrorists. Just as I call Israeli soldiers who kidnap children and kill children terrorists. I use the terrorist label more freely because otherwise it's...
Yes. Yes. They both are terrorists. It's not because for some reason, from now, as soon as we say terrorist, we already attach it to a Muslim person, right? Muslims are terrorists. Americans cannot be terrorists. What? Israel, they are terrorists. Let's be real, right? Like I said again, putting a bouquet on a pig, it's still a pig. You can't change that. They are terrorists, both sides. Let's go.
It's just a politicized, empty phrase that we just apply to our enemies.
Thank
what
you.
I would say, Piers, is that I find it a problem, and you know this, you've joked about all the memes about you, this obsession with what we call Hamas, which is a question you pose, let's be honest, Piers, to most of your pro-Palestinian brown guests.
Thank you.
Don't ask your Israeli or Jewish or pro-Israeli guests to condemn Israeli terrorism or Israeli war crimes at the start of an interview in the way you do.
Well, no, I've been asked directly. I've been asked directly whether I think.
Thank you. Piers Morgan he always been biased, man. Like, come on, bro. When you have an Israeli guest on your show, you do not start the show by asking them to condemn what Israel is doing. You don't do that.
Israel are terrorists, and I've said no. So I don't think they are. I think they had a right to defend themselves. The question is the scale.
That wasn't the point I made, Piers. That wasn't the point I made. I said when you have Israeli guests on. Let me finish my sentence. Let me finish my sentence.
No, Mehdi, it's not your show. It's mine. I wanted to say that, or the whole interview, by the way. So we got that out of the way. That's a joke. I'm joking. But the point I would make is, I think that I asked all the pro-Palestinian guests who've come on.
That's not what he asked him.
Quite quickly.
That is.
Because I think
that's not what he asked you, bro.
If, like you, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had in that first.
He's cooking them.
MSNBC done that. So
he's sweating right now.
Take back the suggestion.
With all the makeup, you can't see
I'm
all the
glad
makeup,
that
but
you
he's
have,
sweating.
that you have called them that. I don't think you can call them anything else. So the moment you have a pro-Palestinian guest who wants to avoid calling what Hamas did an act of terrorism by terrorists, I think it's very revealing about their mindset, and I think it's the wrong mindset.
Here's my problem with that. Why is that not applied to your Israeli guests?
Thank you.
I would be fine, Piers, if you had Palestinian guests and you begin by asking them, do you condemn Hamas war crimes? Because what Hamas did on October 7th was a war crime. But then you should start with Israeli guests and pro-Israeli guests saying, do you condemn Israeli war crimes, which have been documented by the UN, every human rights group on the planet? You don't. You had
Thank you. Every time you have an Israeli guest on your show, you never ask them to condemn what Israel is doing. Never. But every time you have a pro-Palestinian guest on your show, your opening of the show is always, do you condemn Hamas? Is Hamas a terrorist group? Come on, man. We see through you. He's a bigot, right? He's a bigot. Because the thing is the Israeli guests look like Piers Morgan. And the Palestinian guests are Muslims. Okay? This is what it is. Like I said again, it is a Western colonial invasion. And he's on board with it. He's on board with it.
had Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister, on a couple of weeks ago. I watched the interview. Your opening question was, how comfortable are you with the way Israel's prosecuting the war? Right. Bit of a softball to start with. You didn't ask him to condemn Israeli terrorism, Israeli war crimes, Israeli genocide in Gaza. So a lot of people look at that and they say, they get your intention, but it comes across as a bit of a racist double standard.
Well, look, I don't think it's a racist double.
Yes, it's a racist double standard. Yes. Yes. It's a racist double standard. Because you are biased towards your Israel. Plain and simple. You can't hide behind that, man. Right? We see right through you, bro.
Standard, and I think that nobody has given pro-Palestinian voices a bigger platform more consistently since October the 7th than me. And if you go back and look at those interviews, you know, I think that clips get taken out of context and people assume they know what I've said. And often it's completely misleading. I've tried to be fair-minded about it. People do ask me, do you think Israel are terrorists? And I've said no. I don't think they are, but I have repeated. Well, I have repeated because I think they.
Out of interest, why?
Because they were responding to an act of terrorism so heinous it demanded a massive military response. The question for me that's caused me a moral quandary is what is an acceptably proportionate level of response, and I don't know the answer. But I don't think you can call people responding to an act of terror on that scale terrorists for responding. What you can do is hold them to account.
The problem is if you go to Gaza, Piers, and you talk to Palestinians, they will say that Hamas were responding. If we play the who started it game, we go back many decades.
Well, when did Israel kill?
What we need to have is.
Well, hang on. When did Israel kill 1,200
When did Israel kill hundreds of Palestinian civilians?
When did they kill 800 Palestinian civilians?
It was killing these people every day.
2-hour period. Right, in the way that Hamas killed those Israelis.
But that's not the definition of terrorism, how many hours you do it in. I can mention many Israeli massacres going back to Sabra and Shatila, which they oversaw, going back to Kibbutz and Ariel Sharon, going back to Deir Yassin, where rape and violence happened. The point is not to compare atrocities. The point, Piers, is to have a consistent moral principle, which is to say, if you kill civilians for a political cause, you are a terrorist. On that basis, Hamas have committed acts of terror and Israel have committed acts.
Thank you. Both sides are terrorists, right? Israel is committing an act of terror as we speak, dropping bombs on innocent people. That's an act of terror. You can't have it any other way. You can't.
Acts of terror. I think that's only fair to say that.
Yeah, listen, you're perfectly entitled to say it. Of course you are. At the Oscars on Sunday, Jonathan Glazer won an award for Best International Film for The Zone of Interest, a movie about the Holocaust.
This is, man, he cooked them, right? He cooked them, well done, right? Piers was bleeding, right? He was on the ropes bleeding. He didn't know what to do. Yeah. Yeah, he got him. He got him clean. Yeah, guys. So please, guys, leave a comment, subscribe for more videos.